Ronald James Padavona? Known professionally as Ronnie James Dio or simply Dio, was an American heavy metal singer, songwriter, and composer, and was also known for popularizing the sign of the horns in heavy metal. He fronted or founded numerous groups throughout his career, including Elf, Rainbow, Black Sabbath, Dio, and Heaven and Hell.
What is up, guys? Mike Marlinsky here with the Metal Webzine. Welcome to episode 19 of All the Metal Podcast. Today we're going to be talking to Greg D about Ronnie James Dio. We're going to be bringing up Rainbow, Black Sabbath, Dio's solo stuff. We've had some requests for Elf. We're going to probably talk about Heaven and Hell, even though I'm sure Greg doesn't want to do that. So let's just give him a call. We have 15 talking points prepared, but I'm sure we'll get into a number of tangents as we always do. Let's give Greg a call.
Hello, sir.
Hey, there he is.
Here I am.
What's going on? That's Big Greg talking. What's going on? What are you up to?
Just hanging out, sweating, cold beer.
How was your Father's Day?
It was alright. It was pretty relaxing. It's pretty chill, so it's really all I was looking for.
Hell yeah. Okay, so it's Dio week.
Yes.
What, did anything in particular spark this decision?
I don't know if it was anything in particular. I have a Dio-related thing tattooed on me, so I see it quite a bit, so it could have just...
I didn't know you had a Dio tattoo. I didn't... But you know what? We'll talk about that later. We'll talk about the tattoo later, but I didn't know it existed.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Are you ready to dive in?
I'm on the board.
All right. He's ready. Okay, so I divided this into sections. So we'll start with Rainbow. What's your opinion on the chemistry between Ronnie James Dio and Ritchie Blackmore?
I think like a lot of great singer slash and guitarist duos, there's a natural just oil and water vibe to it that generally brings out the best for a indeterminate period of time until it ultimately, that lack of just personal chemistry just tears it apart horrifically. But creatively, it's tough to argue that it doesn't yield results of just the best. I mean, you look at Eddie Van Halen, David Lee Roth, Steven Tyler, Joe Perry,
Yep.
Ritchie Blackmore with really any one of his singers.
Yeah, sure.
It's tale as old as time. If you get a powerful singer and a maestro guitarist, they're going to make musical magic, but they are going to just despise each other. And then eventually that competition of just trying to one-up each other will ultimately destroy the band.
Yeah, tale as old as time, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Good answer, by the way. Very, very brutal, very honest, and it's true. What's your opinion on the Down to Earth album with Graham Bonnet on vocals?
Well, Graham Bonnet, he's another great frontman. He's another example of Ritchie Blackmore with another great singer who made great music, and then they just couldn't stand each other.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Graham Bonnet, they definitely, they went in a different direction after Dio left. I think that was, it's pretty well documented. I believe that's a conscious move by Blackmore. He wanted to kind of get maybe more accessible, but there's still touches of the old Rainbow sound on it too. So it's not like it's drastically, but
it wasn't a departure.
They did have their first really big hit song on that record. So
yeah,
since you've been gone, so yeah, it's a cool record.
Rising or Long Live Rock and Roll?
I think as far as both are really, really influential. But I think as far as the broader scope of just like the wider influence, I think it's Rising, just because it's it's a pretty grandiose statement. I mean, it's only 6 songs, but a bunch of them are pretty long. So
sure.
Long Live Rock and Roll is definitely got more of like definitely less epic, for sure.
It's more straightforward.
More straightforward. It's less about the grandiose, sprawling arrangements. Although that is there to a degree, absolutely. It's definitely much more accessible, I guess.
Yep. To the mainstream and such, yeah.
It's pretty hooky. It's pretty catchy.
Yep. What's your favorite... Oh, we're getting into Black Sabbath now. What's your favorite Tony Iommi guitar moment on Heaven and Hell? Well, actually, you gotta pick one for each Dio album. So Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules, and Dehumanizer. So your favorite Tony guitar moment on each one.
Alright. That's quite a task. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to pull up my track listing of those records, see if I can kind of jog the old memory. I'm not as great with remembering song titles as I once was.
Sure.
I would say on Heaven and Hell, my favorite guitar moment is in Die Young, and it's the part right after the "Someone Stop the Fan." And there's that little synth kind of blurb, and there's that da-na-na, da-na-na, da-da-da, like that's like really, really emblematic of.
It stops your heart.
Metal, that like a metal riff that would really become kind of abundant going forward. And not to mention, I always wanted to do a version, like a cover of that song, because generally I'm in bands that have 2 guitars, so I always hear like the guitar harmony there that isn't there, because it would just be such a perfect place for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I always thought that what was great about Sabbath is that like they've really influenced 2 eras of metal. They really pioneered it, really. I mean, obviously they were, the stuff with Ozzy really has influenced its own school of metal, and then the Dio era really, I think, influenced, kind of more of like the original Doom bands in a way.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely. Yep.
Stuff like Candlemass, Solitude Eternus, Trouble, stuff like that. Before it really became like more of a stoner doom influence of like the Ozzy years that really kind of took over. I really think that the Dio years really inspired a lot of not just the original doom metal, but just a lot of traditional styled heavy metal that came after that.
Sure.
So.
Yep.
All right. So I kind of derailed there for a second.
No, that was a good tangent, though. That was a good tangent.
Hell. On Mob Rules, that riff, that first riff, the main riff of the title track, is just such a fucking stomping riff. I mean, it's just like, it's ridiculous. I don't think there's a music video for the song, at least not that I'm aware of, but like, when I hear that riff, when it just comes crashing in, like, and then Dio goes, ah! And I always picture that when he says "come on" and the drums kick in, like I always picture like Dio like kicking in a door.
Right.
You know, when he does
yeah.
that part. I don't know why. Like that to me, that's the visual. It's like such a stomping, just dominating riff and song, just in general. But it's just like it's just punishing, just super hard, super tough, just like all grit. All right, so that's Mob Rules. The Humanizer. That's kind of tough. You know what? It's the obvious choice for me. I was trying to kind of be maybe a little more abstract, but
Sure.
I'm going to go with the song "Buried Alive" because I think it's the heaviest song in the Sabbath catalog.
Oh, like for both eras of Sabbath?
I think out of any era of Black Sabbath, I think the song "Buried Alive" is probably like the heaviest or toughest song they ever recorded.
Sure.
You know, it's just like such a...
I'd have to listen to that one again to understand what you're talking about, but...
It's just such a gnarly, super tough, heavy riff. And it's not really relevant to, I guess, the riff, but towards the end of the song, when the main riff comes back around after the solo section, Vinny Appice flips the drum beat around for like half a measure maybe, and still it fucks with me every time I hear it. It's awesome though.
Right. Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, I'd have to check that one out again. Like, I need to like review all this shit to like truly understand.
It's heavy. It's a heavy song.
Yeah.
It's barbaric.
Barbaric. That's quite a word to use for Black Sabbath.
Totally What's that?
That's quite a word to use when describing a Black Sabbath song. So that like there sells me on it. If you're gonna call a Black Sabbath riff barbaric.
Oh, it's so heavy, dude. It's totally, just wait till you hear it, man. It's totally heavy. I would say, you know, that whole song slams. But if I had to, I don't know, if I had to give you, just because to me that's the obvious choice, if I had to come up with something else, I would also say the one of the riffs. I think it would be the right after the verse riff in "After All the Dead." That's kind of got a vibe of the song Black Sabbath. It's that kind of riff.
Oh yeah.
It sounds so evil and just so demented, and no one spins those riffs like Tony Iommi does.
Mm-hmm.
He's the godfather of that.
Yep. Godfather of Doom in a certain context. What was I gonna? Oh yeah, of those three, which is your favorite album?
See, the problem with that is that they're all excellent, you know, and
which one has more songs that you love?
Well, I have a Heaven and Hell tattoo, so I guess
that's the tattoo then. Okay, we'll get into that story. Tell me the story of the tattoo later. But no, we've identified the album the tattoo's based on. That's pretty cool. That's pretty fucking cool. Okay, so creative task: get inside Ronnie James Dio's head, and based on the available written accounts, how do you imagine the deterioration of Ronnie's ability to work creatively and professionally with Tony Iommi went down?
Well, as far as I know, it was never a creative deterioration. It was a business deterioration.
Yeah, creatively and professionally, so not like creatively at all.
Creatively, those guys were peas and carrots, peanut butter and jelly, whatever analogy you want to use. Those guys were just right on the fucking mark. Those guys were always they were something. But from what I know, it wasn't a creative difference that tore it apart. It was Sabbath got offered to open for Ozzy Osbourne at Ozzy's first ever farewell concert. This is back in like 1992. And they took the gig, and they didn't even ask Ronnie James Dio. And he was like, no, I don't want to fucking open for this guy. Like, this totally, like, this totally undermines, which I see his point. I'm sure there's ego involved, but
But they didn't ask him. But they didn't ask him.
Our validity as having our own thing. If we're just going to go back and be, a support act for Ozzy Osbourne.
Sure.
Which is unfortunate that it fell apart. But the cool thing is that if you witnessed that show, you saw Black Sabbath sing with Rob Halford, which is pretty fucking cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So as far as I know, it was nothing creative that caused their dissolution.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't.
Business and hurt feelings. Sounds like to me.
Yeah, they didn't. So he wasn't consulted about opening the show, which is like. Yeah, that's.
That's what I mean. Just off the top of my head, that's what I always thought it was.
I vaguely remember something like that. It just that just kind of hits home, because that's the kind of thing you even hear about, like. I don't know. That sounds like local band drama to me, but like, there's a lot of that. I mean, that's where it all stems from.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. Yeah. Well, Dio was, intensely proud, and when you're at that level, and there's big league drama between two just titans frontmen like Ozzy and Ronnie, one's never going to want to, kind of bend, and obviously the perception of the opening act is that they're lesser than the headliner.
Yep.
And so, he was Ronnie James Dio.
Yeah, yep.
You could argue that he shouldn't have to open for anybody. But
even then, yeah.
I'm damn sure not surprised he didn't want to open for Ozzy Osbourne.
For Ozzy, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I guess the answer to this one's pretty obvious given this conversation, but in general, like, do you prefer Ozzy Sabbath or Dio Sabbath?
I prefer Dio Sabbath.
Yeah.
And it wasn't always like that. When I was growing up, obviously we're around the same age, I think, trying to think, because at that Ozzy, and that's probably made it even worse for Dio too, because at that reunion, at that show where they opened for Ozzy, at the end of Ozzy's set, those dudes came out and played songs as the original Black Sabbath. So Dio would have really just had to kind of take it in the ass big time on this kick. And so after that happened, of course, just like it inevitably does every time he does this, Ozzy's retirement never lasts. So at that point, because they had done those gigs, there was kind of rumors that Sabbath with Ozzy was going to, resume at some point. And it ultimately did, I think, 4 or 5 years later. But, I'm trying to think here. So because of that, at that time, that was the lineup that was really starting to get a lot of the press and a lot of the push as far as, like, awareness. Bands like Soundgarden, a lot of the grunge bands, Melvin were really, not Melvins are a grunge band, but you know what I'm saying, like...
Right, no, I get it.
That new generation, they were really, really fond of the old, sludgy Sabbath style, and that became like that was the cool Sabbath. And so, as a kid, I just kind of assumed that, the Ozzy era was really the only one that mattered.
Sure.
And although I did like, the Dio stuff I was familiar with, and whatever Rainbow songs I knew that Dio was on, as a kid. I thought that stuff was cool. I just assumed, no Ozzy, it's not really worth anything, you know. And it wasn't until I was probably in my early to mid 20s, and I started to get more into just Dio and his journey, kind of his discography, and I bought Heaven and Hell. And I didn't really know a lot of people that were crazy about the Dio era of Sabbath, just because it was a lot of people were just crazy about the Ozzy stuff. And I know Jeffers, he liked the Dio stuff, obviously, but I didn't really know anyone who would just openly go to the wall and just go to bat for the Dio era of Sabbath. And there's really only one person. It was Ryan Pernott, who was in Drunken Orgy of Destruction, Avulsion,
Yeah.
Period Blast, Imminent Collapse, a bunch of bands.
Sure.
He was the only person I knew that really just went hard on the Dio stuff is Superior. And, after listening to the Heaven and Hell record, I was really blown away at how different it was from the rest of the Sabbath material with Ozzy, and just in general how it was basically a different band.
Different band, yes.
Different sound. I mean, when you're dealing with clean vocals,
they are very different singers, and I've always gotten the same impression. Like, even though instrumentally it's similar, but overall they do sound like two completely different bands.
I think that obviously Sabbath with Ozzy, they definitely started to get more into like the psychedelic kind of druggier side of things, fucking with synths and just general,
the slower riffing and the slower
honest,
bends.
I was never really crazy about.
Yep.
Sure. I was into more of the pummeling stuff, and I think that was why ultimately I took more to the Dio stuff, because it kind of cut the fat on some of the weird experimental weird fucking drugged out, coked out, synthy stuff that was just kind of like, it was kind of filler to me. And they cut all that fat out with Dio, and they're like, we're just going to go for the throat now.
It's going to be a fucking heavy rock band, yep.
We're just going to go for the throat, because, when you're dealing with clean vocals, you do have to kind of,
cater.
Especially if you get a different kind of singer, you do have to cater the sound
shape
of the band
to it a little bit,
tailor it to fit that range of the vocalist. And obviously Dio was a totally different singer than Ozzy. Another difference is that Dio writes his own lyrics, whereas as far as I know, Geezer Butler wrote 90 to 95 or 99% of the lyrics when Ozzy was in the band. And it just the Dio stuff, and then obviously after that it was Mob Rules, and then later on Dehumanizer. I mean, it just the quality and just the overall power of those three. It's three technically. Well, it's three actually, but it's four technically. You know what I'm saying? If you count the Heaven and Hell album, the band, the album they did as Heaven and Hell, it's the same lineup as the Mob Rules album and the Humanizer album, but obviously Sharon Osbourne owns the name Black Sabbath. She's not going to let Ronnie James Dio, front Black Sabbath anymore.
Sure.
But so for all intents and purposes, we'll just say it was 4 records, and it's just they had magic there. They had chemistry.
Oh yeah.
And it was just so powerful, and the weight of those 4 records. I mean, the weakest is definitely the Heaven and Hell record, but that's not to say that it's weak. It's a record that I enjoy. But
But compared to the others,
I would listen to probably any Dio era Sabbath record before any other Sabbath album.
sure.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like
I won't even say probably. I definitely.
No, you summed it all up. You summed it all up perfectly. Like, I really prefer that sound. I don't like the spacey, super slow bendy guitars with like the synths, the weird like stoner stuff, like you said.
Well, it was the '70s, and these bands were just blowing a ton of money on drugs and spending forever in the studio, and everything was different back then as far as
I get the
bands
vibe.
were writing in the studio back then. I mean, it's not like bands would practice. I mean, bands would either write on the road and then they would get
sure. Yeah, that's a good point too, right?
They would write in the studio and they would have time to fuck around a little bit, and then sometimes that would really not behoove the band because then you end up with shit that maybe you only think sounded good because you were high that night. Did you ever
get into Cathedral?
What was that?
You ever get into Cathedral?
Yeah, definitely. Some of the Cathedral stuff is a little goofy. You can audibly hear on the Carnival Bazaar album when Lee Dorian gets sucked into the void of the 70s, to which he would not return or recover for probably at least another 10 or 15 years before he fell out of that time warp. But Cathedral's cool. I think as far as, Sabbath-inspired stuff, they were probably, they were cool. I think what held them back, though, from being bigger was the vocals, because Lee Dorian really isn't much of a singer, per se.
He's kind of yelling.
He's kind of like, I don't know what he's doing. It's an acquired taste. I dig it.
You said goofy, and that's a good way to describe their sound overall. But yeah, it's kind of like goofy yelling. Yeah.
Well, what is it on the song "Ride"? Like the first line of vocals is like, "Hey, what do you got to say? I think I'm gonna ride." It's like goofball shit. Compared to the seriousness of the vocals and the lyrics of Napalm Death, which was his band before Cathedral, obviously, it was like totally polar opposite of that.
Yeah, he's just having fun, hanging a little too loose.
Yeah. Yeah. So Cathedral, it's fun, but sometimes it's just a little too much for me.
Right. Yeah, we were just talking about like the heavier doom stuff, so they just popped into my head.
I think I read an interview sometime or a review of one of their shows where it said only Lee Dorian could get away with acting like Lee Dorian. If you look at the music video for Hopkins off of the Carnival Bazaar album, like it's just so fucking ridiculous. He's just prancing around. It's something for sure.
Right on. All right, we got guest questions. Ryan Howe asks, "What's your opinion of Elf, and why doesn't anyone talk about Elf?"
Honestly, the Dio material prior to Rainbow, I'm only casually familiar with. It never really, interested me too much. Elf, I don't think gets a lot of the talk that presumably this person thinks, because it's like an appetizer, really, right?
Right.
It's
it's salad. It's the salad at dinner, right?
Well, it's calamari.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
It's the Elf stuff I've heard. It's not like I think it's terrible, but it's just not particularly some stuff that I could see myself sitting down and listening to over and over again.
Right. Okay, with regard to the origin of the devil's... Well, Ryan just wanted me to bring up the devil's horns gesture, but I was going to follow that up anyways with Ronnie James Dio versus Gene Simmons on.
I knew you were gonna say that.
On who truly originated and who should truly have some sort of copyright on the devil horns.
I'm gonna weigh in on this. Well, first of all, as Dio has said a number of times, it's from Italian culture.
Yes.
He's from upstate New York. He actually went to UB in 1962.
Yeah, he's from Cortland,
Yeah. He was a pharmacy major at UB, which I think is pretty neat, but...
Right.
It's called the Maloik, and...
I remember.
Yeah, you can either hold it upright, which is, it protects you from the evil, or you could point the horns at someone, and it kind of casts evil upon them. He turned it into something that became identifiable to him. So that's why, Gene Simmons can kind of fuck off. He didn't invent Italian culture. I doubt
Yeah, this is something Dio grew up with, that it was perfectly natural to him.
Yeah, he was born in Israel in like the 40s, so I doubt Gene Simmons really had anything to do with establishing Italian culture.
Yeah.
But I think even Dio had a comment that I thought was hilarious about that, because someone brought that up to him about Gene Simmons saying that he took credit for it. And I think Dio said something like, "Well, I'm sure he believes that, but Gene would also tell you that he invented breathing in shoes."
Yeah, sure.
So Dio all the way. Gene Simmons needs to stay in his lane there.
Sure. Glenn from Tynes asks, do you think that Egypt, When the Chains Are On, is a watered-down version of Rainbow's Gates of Babylon?
Oh, that's such a Glenn question to ask. If Glenn thinks that,
it might be true.
If Glenn thinks that, I could see. Then there's merit. I personally, I don't know if I would co-sign, but
you're right. That's a good way to put it.
I wouldn't besmirch anyone. Well, I shouldn't say anyone, but Glenn knows his shit. So if he thinks that to a degree, then I'm going to really kind of maybe have to A/B those songs and give him a second glance. I can kind of hear it, but I'd really have to kind of dig into it.
You'd have to do your own analysis.
I guess I could probably get there, but I don't know. Egypt it's got a whole different vibe to me. Not a whole different vibe, but a different vibe to me. But if Glenn says that, then there's definitely merit to that.
Merit to it, yeah, right. Okay, so moving into Dio solo section of this questionnaire. In generally speaking, and I know it's a lot of material to cover a lot of studio albums, or a lot of songs, I should say. Talk about your favorite Vivian Campbell moments on guitar, because I know that was something you really wanted to bring up, was Vivian Campbell. So
yeah, that was
if you want to just go nuts on just solos and riffs and just anything that really jumps out at you from Vivian Campbell.
Well, he is, and unfortunately I think it's his affiliation with Def Leppard that has really unfortunately kind of cast aside his legacy as a fucking really ferocious guitar player. And the first 3 Dio records, I think that initial lineup he had of the band will always be, in my opinion, the best one, just because of Vivian. Maybe it's Sacred Heart, the last record of the 3, definitely the weakest. You could definitely tell that maybe they were starting to stray a little bit, and ultimately that's kind of why the records that maybe the next two that followed after that I wasn't really particularly too fond of, but yeah, the first year of Vivian Campbell, I mean, you can't, right, we'll just start from the beginning. Holy Diver, that record is maybe, and when I say maybe, I mean very, very high probability, it's maybe my favorite lead guitar record of all time.
Wow. Wow.
It's so much so that, for the past, anytime I remember, whenever I do solos, like on records or whatever, I always do it with a copy of Holy Diver out.
Really? Is that like your touchstone? Like you just have to have it out in the room and visible?
Yeah, it's just I feel like it's a good vibe to have around me when I'm trying to cut leads.
That's really cool. I don't think I've ever heard that from someone before.
Vivian Campbell had, considering the type of lead guitarist that was really kind of getting all the hype in the press in the 80s, it was a lot of Eddie Van Halen inspired stuff. It was either some kind of Van Halen thing, or it was some kind of like neoclassical Yngwie thing, or some fucking insano Steve Vai thing, or someone maybe kind of in between, like George Lynch or stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? And Vivian Campbell really wasn't any of that. He came from a totally different school. He was he was definitely shredding, but he wasn't doing sweeps. He wasn't really tapping. He really had his own thing, and he had this great tone, especially on the Holy Diver album. That's Rainbow in the Dark is probably my favorite guitar solo of all time. That guitar solo is textbook storytelling leads, which is, to me, that's really where I come from as far as the way I approach leads. I try and
you tell a story with it. It isn't just blind or nonsensical shredding, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a story. It has a structure. It has three acts to it, right?
He builds up to the nuts part. He builds up to the crazy fast part. Like he had a sense of, he just had a feel that was different. To really a lot of other players that people would probably consider his peers at that point. He was a very, very different type of lead guitarist. Now the question was just his solos or just anything?
Any guitar moments.
Well, the entire Holy Diver record. I know that might sound cop-out, but...
No, it's really not, if it means that much to you. If you have that out in front of you whenever you write a lead on guitar, then that is that important to you, and that very significant.
Not when I write it, just when I'm in the studio tracking it.
Well, still, that I've never heard of anyone doing that. No one's ever really said anything quite like that to me before. Like, that's really cool, that you carry that moment in time with you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's super inspiring. All right, let me just, the entire Holy Diver record, the solo in the song, The Last in Line, that's fucking awesome. That's kind of in the same vibe as maybe the Holy Diver kind of thing. The song, I Speed at Night, that's just great, kind of up-tempo, Euro, metal, boogie style riffing, and, the song We Rock, there's just... You go to Sacred Heart, too. Yeah, I guess if I could really just, if I could pinpoint, just if someone wanted to know what Dio era Vivian Campbell all about, I mean, I would just have to play them the Holy Diver record.
Sure.
I mean, if you're pressing me to pick moments, or if someone wanted to kind of get a whole cross section, I could. But really, I feel like the best way to do that would just be to give them Holy Diver.
Sure.
It's phenomenal. The guitar playing, the riffing is, I mean, he's solid on both ends. He's got great rhythms, great riffs, and he's just got some absolutely lacerating leads, you know?
Oh, great descriptor.
Yeah. Like
lacerating leads.
Yeah.
That's
absolutely.
beautifully worded. So you pretty much answered my next question, which was just to name your favorite Dio solo album, or if you have another one, like based on what you said, it's got to be Holy Diver, but if you have another one that's up there with Holy Diver or anything like that, like, so if Holy Diver's your favorite, like, who would the runner-up be then?
Well, it's an era that I'm only kind of vaguely familiar with, but after Vivian Campbell left the band, he was replaced by a guy named Craig Goldie, and I never really thought too highly of him. I think he was around for, I'm trying to think, I think he might have only been on one record. I think he only might have been on Dream Evil.
He did not last in the band?
I don't think so. I think, let me see here.
Dream Evil I was just listening to today. I was listening to Dream Evil and Lock Up the Wolves.
Let's see here. Dream Evil, yeah, that was 87. Yeah, and I think that was, that would have been the only record Craig Goldie was on. And honestly, I don't have that record, but that's only because what I've heard from it hasn't ever really grabbed me too well. Like, one of the first Dio CDs I had was the comp, the greatest hits comp. I got it when I was like 17 or 18. It was called The Very Beast of Dio. And the stuff that they had on there from Dream Evil and Lock Up the Wolves, it's just missing something for me.
Right.
You know?
Yep.
Lock Up the Wolves, I think, might be a little bit better. But
I agree. I think it is a little better than
record.
Dream Evil, yeah.
Yeah. Lock Up the Wolves is weird because he had another one-album guitarist on Lock Up the Wolves, and it was a dude named Rowan Robertson, who I think might have also been from Ireland, I think, or Scotland, one of the two.
I think Scotland, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, might have been Scotland, but he was fucking young. Like, when he auditioned for Dio, I think he was 17.
No shit.
So he was like crazy young. Like, I remember, like, when I was a kid, that was like, I remember hearing about that, and that was like a big deal. Like, oh, Dio's got this fucking like hotshot 17-year-old wonderkind on guitar, you know. But even so, that didn't last. And then after that, they got some guy named Tracy G. And he was a different kind of guitarist. He really kind of had like he had a much darker, heavier, riffier feel than Rowan Robertson, Craig Goldie, and Vivian Campbell. Like, the two records he did with Dio are very, very heavy. I'm not talking like they're like, you know, Obituary or anything like that. Obviously, it's not like a death metal heavy, but for Dio records, they're very, very aggressive, and they're very angry, and they're very heavy, and he's a different kind of guitar player. So I would say if I had to go with and then after that era, the record, the 2 or 3 records after that, I'm just really not too familiar with at all, unfortunately. But I've heard them all, and nothing has, to me, stood the test better than Holy Diver, Last in Line, and although these records are kind of newer to me, the Tracy G era is fucking pretty good stuff. I slept on those for a long time. But
just because they weren't Vivian Campbell?
Yeah, probably.
Possibly.
I think also just because, I don't really have a good answer. I think it was just because I had associated so much of the solo Dio quality with Vivian. You're probably right. And then the stuff after Vivian, like the stuff immediately after Vivian, the 2 records after he was gone, to me were kind of substandard. So I think that probably kept me away from really investigating too much of the stuff that came out after Campbell was gone. But, over the past couple of years, I finally gave that Tracy G era stuff a chance, and it's cool because Dio was, you could tell he was trying to, I don't want to say get with the times because it sounds like he was, when you say that, it sounds like someone's catering or pandering.
Right.
But he did seem to have a genuine interest of taking things that he liked.
Like modernizing.
He was open-minded. Yeah, he was open-minded enough to listen to newer things and find things he liked about it and find a way to properly apply it to what he did. And I thought he did a good job, along with Tracy G, in doing that on those early to mid-'90s records. And there's something to be said for that,
Sure.
Here's a guy who was really, for all intents and purposes, he's on the ground floor of heavy metal.
Yes.
He was in Rainbow. He was in Black Sabbath. He had his own solo band.
Yep. Sure.
That's to me, that's something I've noticed, I think, about a lot of those guys, to a degree. I shouldn't say everyone, but to a degree. A lot of the people who are in on the ground floor of something end up on the ground floor because they're constantly looking for something new.
Right.
And obviously the genres that have become of music, they're a result of an evolution, a progression.
Right.
And someone has to be willing to look outside the box or operate outside the box in order to find that next new world.
Sure.
And I think that Dio was good at that. So that's why I think
innovative. Yep.
It's probably not his more popular records, but I thought he did a really good job of identifying elements of new music that he liked and was successful in incorporating them to what he does normally.
Yep.
And I think that's why some of that Tracy G stuff I would put up there with Holy Diver and Last in Line.
Right on. Yep.
Mm-hmm. To give you the absolute long answer.
No, I mean, that's however long it takes to get there. I mean, this is, these are loaded. So, what's your opinion on Master of the Moon?
Not too familiar. I remember when it came out, checking it out, a couple songs. At that point, though, I was kind of Master of the Moon. What was that? Was that
2004.
02 or 04?
Yeah.
2004, okay. Yeah, at that point I was, I was pretty heavy into, holy fuck, I'm getting old. Yeah, at that point I was, really heavily, it's not like I'm not heavily into death metal anymore, but death metal was definitely a lot newer to me back then, and so I don't think I really gave it a whole lot.
You were distracted by death metal at the time, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. definitely. Yeah. More aggressive pastors were calling me by that point.
Sure.
So, yeah, I remember that record when it came out. I remember hearing a song or two, but, it was nothing that, at that time, really grabbed me enough to kind of look away from what else I was doing. I'll probably have to go give it a second look now,
Right. Okay, getting into closers, I have 3 closers. What's your opinion on the use of holograms at live performances?
I don't think I like it. And I guess I get the point of it, but I don't think I'm into it.
Right.
There's really 2 schools of thought that you could.
I think I know what you're gonna say too. Yeah.
That you could convincingly make when trying to entertain this conversation, and the one that you're going to get from obviously, whatever organization or management is, rolling out the hologram is generation. There's going to be generations of people who will never have seen Ronnie James Dio perform live. This is a way to
recreate it,
realize that, and have a way, also to kind of keep his legacy and his music alive in a, in my opinion, weird way.
Yeah, it's virtual. It's a virtual concert within a live concert.
Yeah, and then finds a way to involve the person who's no longer with us. And if you're going to look at it from that perspective, all right, then that's pretty cool. But the other thing you could be looking at is it's just like, well, just trying to make money. Which, I mean, essentially that's really what they are doing.
Absolutely. Making money off nostalgia.
Yeah, and it's not unauthorized. It's authorized by his, wife or ex-wife. I think they got divorced before he passed, but, his ex-wife was his manager for all those years. So, I mean, if it's authorized by her, then I guess who the fuck am I to really kind of criticize it? But I don't really think I'm into it.
Right. And I always thought she was against it. She's for it?
I think it's authorized by her.
Okay.
It's their operation.
Okay.
Yeah.
I misread something, or I misheard something along the way then. Yeah.
It's an official thing. I would rather see someone else sing those songs than see, imaginary, weird, reanimated Ronnie James Dio.
No, absolutely right. Yep.
Yeah. So.
I agree, yeah, for sure.
But that's me. I'm sure a lot of, I'm not sure. I can't even guess. A lot of people are into it. So.
Yeah, they've sold out. They've sold out shows that way, so, yeah.
Yeah. People dig it, so who the fuck am I?
How did you feel about the Heaven and Hell project starting in 2006 and the new Black Sabbath songs from 2007?
I think the only reason why Ozzy Osbourne's Black Sabbath became a thing again is because Ronnie James Dio is dead. I think that if he had never died, we would still be hearing about Heaven and Hell albums and Heaven and Hell tours.
Sure.
Because it was that good. And I fucking hate that I missed an opportunity to see it live.
Sure.
Yeah,
I never saw it. Right.
Unfortunate, and I think that project, which is, you can basically include the 2 new Black Sabbath songs in 2006 as well. I mean, it's basically the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought that it was really, really good. You could tell that they still had it,
The chemistry of that original group, yeah.
Yeah, and I think they preferred to work with with Dio. They probably didn't make as much money going out with Dio than they did with Ozzy.
With Ozzy, right?
Ozzy is the, no matter how many other great singers Black Sabbath has had, the singer of Black Sabbath will always be, to the general public, Ozzy Osbourne.
Ozzy Osbourne, yeah, for sure.
And so they're not going to...
And he's always getting a bigger cut of everything he touches.
Yes, absolutely. And so first of all, they can't even go out as Black Sabbath with Ronnie James Dio, because Sharon Osbourne just will not allow it. So they lose the moniker, and that probably cuts them the money they're making. And it's, so they made less money doing it, but I genuinely think that, Vinny Appice, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, I think they were happier being in a band with Dio, because there's none of the Osbourne baggage or issues to deal with.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of drama there.
There's no Sharon element. There's none of that shit to deal with.
No reality TV show.
No reality TV show. No singer that, basically they didn't have to worry about doing everything for him, which is what they had to do for Ozzy Osbourne. Dio wrote his own lyrics. He wrote his own vocal melodies. He did his own shit. He was his own man. And I think that they enjoyed working with him, especially at that age. The older you get, the easier you want things to be.
Yeah.
And the less bullshit that you want to deal with. You just want to be able to show up, do your shit, do it well, and then get the fuck out. And then, go on to the next one. And I think that they had that capability and ability, just in general, to do that with Ronnie James Dio. That they just don't have with Ozzy Osbourne, because they deal with someone who is, fucking has elevator, light switch sobriety, someone who has a lot of other problems just physically as well, and not to mention just vocal issues as well,
Oh, for sure.
I just think from a band perspective, if you're looking at it from all the things that if you remove the business and the money out of it, which when you're at that level it's probably difficult to do, probably even impossible, but if you remove the business element out of it and you look at it from strictly a creative standpoint, those guys have no reason to be in a band with Ozzy Osbourne if you have Ronnie James Dio available.
Right on.
Ronnie James Dio he doesn't have he had a persona, no doubt about it, but he didn't have the Ozzy persona, which I'm happy he didn't have the Ozzy persona. I'm pretty fucking sure Ronnie James Dio's happy he didn't have the Ozzy persona.
Oh, it would have tanked everything.
Yeah, he was awesome. He was awesome with that band. And again, I don't know. I'm sure they would have eventually done something with Ozzy again, but I think that Dio's passing really, that's to me the only reason why that last Sabbath record came out. They had to do something.
Right. Well, okay, so for this last one, definitely include the story behind the tattoo. But the last question is the same as it always is. Talk about your personal connection or history with Ronnie James Dio.
Well, like everything else thus far, it involves 103.3 The Fox and being a kid and hearing stuff like Man on the Silver Mountain from Rainbow and along with Rock and Roll and Holy Diver, Rainbow in the Dark. I only really knew those 4 songs for a long time. And then I remember when I was 17 or 18, I was at Media Play, and I saw they had that Dio comp I was talking about earlier, and so I bought it. And then I finally got a bit of a glimpse of, some of his other stuff beyond the Holy Diver record. And I was like, okay, cool, awesome. And it served its purpose. It it gave me the songs that I knew and wanted to hear, and it also kind of at that time told me, you know what, I think that this is probably something we're going to investigate further, you know, beyond the greatest hits CD, you know, because
Yeah.
there's obviously some meat on that bone.
Oh, sure.
And then after that, I'm trying to think, my years and order of purchase might be out of order. I don't remember if I got Holy Diver first in full, or I got Heaven and Hell, but I will say for discussion's sake, I think shortly after that, I think maybe when I was 20 or 21, I bought Heaven and Hell. Maybe 22, I don't remember. Around it, we'll say somewhere between fucking 19 and 22. I got Heaven and Hell, and that was like I touched on earlier. That was just it was a mind blower, you know. And then from there after that, you know, I got Last in Line and Mob Rules, and this has probably been a process, just a slow process of establishing or, you know, acquiring Dio-related discography over the past, you know, maybe 14 years, I would say, you know. And so after that, it was, you know, I got the full-length to Holy Diver, and I think I actually got my copy of Last in Line from Mike Jeffers. I think he fucking bought a copy of it, forgetting that he already had a copy of it. I think that's how I inherited that one. And then you know, after that, Mob Rules, Dehumanizer, you know, Heaven and Hell, and, you know, the Rainbow Records. This all kind of built up over, you know, a 14-year period. Just buy records when I could. When I got around to it, I'd buy a record, you know, and that was just, you know, the music was just great. I loved it. But then ultimately, I think what really, really drew me in as far as establishing a bond, you know, between, you know, me and Ronnie James Dio was the lyrical content. And I know a lot's been made of, you know, as far as his singing about tigers and dragons and wizards or whatever, which, you know, is, yeah, that's there. But, you know, he really did have a take and a grasp on humans in a very beautiful way. And some of the, no, not some, I'm a huge fan of his lyrics. They're just, he just nails it. He got life. And he knew how to, you know,
He paints a picture
to it and do, yes, he knew how to paint a picture through metaphor that you just got. It made sense. And I think that a lot of that stuff, you know, I maybe didn't get, you know, when I was young. You know, and I think the older I got, you know, the older you get, the more you experience. The more, you know, just the more life you take on, the more those things make sense to you because you can relate to it now. Because you're so young, you're not, you know, you don't know what it's like to have a lot of people, you know, that are close to you and your age die. You know, you don't know what it's like to, you know, have your, you know, heart broken or you know, I'm saying, like, these are just things that happen with age. You know, you establish great experiences, and, you know, unfortunately, you know, the flip side of that is you accumulate bad ones as well too. And the older I got, the more his lyrics made perfect sense to me, and the more I drew strength from that. You know?
Yep.
In bad times, you know, I could find, you know, hope. And, you know, in Dio's lyrics. In great times, you know, it supplements, you know? So it's,
Yes.
He's a vocalist that I can't imagine. I mean, it only gets better with age.
Right.
Those lyrics only get better with age. You know? Not everything in life is easy. Not everything in life is good. You know?
Yep. Yep.
And that probably ties itself into the tattoo as well. You know, Ronnie James Dio says, you know, he thinks life is heaven and hell. You know, it's all right here. Maybe there's a heaven and hell after this. Who knows?
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
But
no one does. No one living does.
Heaven and hell is here. You know, we're in it right now. You know, and he wrote the lyrics to that song. I think about how things fell apart with Rainbow. And he uncorked one of the most beautiful, brilliant lyric lines I've ever heard in my entire life. And it's been repeated a million times. It's the line of all lines. And I think anyone listening to this right now knows what I'm about to say. But there's a reason why this line has connected to so many people. Because it's universal. And it's, the world is full of kings and queens who blind your eyes and steal your dreams. It's heaven and hell. I mean, that's fucking aces. You know?
Yeah.
In some way, everyone can relate to that.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Whether you're 56, you can relate to that. You know, and that's just one of a string of lyrics that I could point to that just really connect with me.
Yeah, it's just one of a million gems. Yeah.
Yeah, I could listen to Dio songs and, you know, I could catch a line and think, oh wow, that's me. You know, like I'm trying to think. There's a line in the last in line. We search for the truth. We could die upon the tooth, but the thrill of just the chase is worth the pain.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't want to get too in depth, but yeah, sometimes, you know, in search of the truth, you know, you find stuff that you maybe wish you'd never found out. But you still carry on. You still continue to try and find the truth.
Yep.
You know, because it's a worthwhile pursuit. Yeah, maybe sometimes it hurts. Maybe all the time it hurts. But at the end of the day, you know, you're willing to make that sacrifice. You know? And so and Dio's lyrics are just chock full of that. You know, he's one of a handful of guys that I just think have a really unique understandanding of life and people in a way that just is really unmatched by anyone else outside.
Sure.
He's one of them.
Sure.
For the sake of conversation, I'll say the other ones are David Lee Roth, Lemmy, and Mike Muir.
Yep.
You know, these are people who just had a different take, a different slant, and a different look at life, and they were just really able to kind of just nail it.
Yes.
You know, and Dio is, yeah. The older I get, the more it means to me. That's why at 37 years old, I got a heaven and hell tattoo.
What is the tattoo?
Oh, it's just one of the it's one of the smoking angels on the cover.
Okay. And no text? Or text?
No text.
Just the smoking angel? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great, man. That's a cool tattoo. Do you have a hint about next week's artist?
I don't even fucking know.
Fair enough.
I think I'm usually, you know, the heat usually brings some thrash into the playlist. I'm, you know, for whatever reason, just summertime and thrash just
the Need for Speed.
For me, so. Yeah, possibly. So I mean, maybe it'll be something more aggressive, but obviously, I texted you what I thought it was going to be, and then like 3 minutes later, texted you back saying, "Nope, changed my mind."
Well, you had that other option in my mind for about a week, and just the other day you changed it to Dio, and I actually really like that. I like the abrupt change and having to change up my my research to prepare for the episode and all that. No, this was fun.
It didn't feel right to go with what I was going to go with, and that might come back around. But we'll see what goes.
No, I know what you mean. If it's wrong, it's wrong. You know what you feel. So.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. All right, sir. So until next week.
Until next week, man.
Until next week. This was fun, man. All right, I will have this up for you tomorrow.
Stand up and shout.
All right, have a good one, man. Have a good night.
You too, dude.
Bye-bye.